Today, we're going to tackle one of the most powerful and, honestly, most confusing forces in all of modern history, nationalism. We're going to approach it like a giant puzzle, a mystery that has shaped our world in some pretty profound ways. So let's dive right in.
And right away, here is the absolute heart of our puzzle. How can an idea that has built empires, shattered empires, started world wars, and commanded the passionate loyalty of billions of people be so, well, philosophically messy? It's a huge paradox, and it sits right at the center of the world we live in today.
You know, to really get to the bottom of this, we first have to appreciate just how contradictory nationalism is. It's not one clean idea. It's this fascinating bundle of ideas that often seem to be fighting each other.
I mean, just look at this. It's a study in contradiction. Nationalists will tell you their nation is ancient, going back to the dawn of time, but historians are pretty clear that nationalism itself is a modern invention. It claims universal rights for all nations, but in practice, it's intensely focused on your nation above all others. And maybe the weirdest part, for all its world-changing power, the theory behind it can seem kind of simple. Plus, it can attach itself to pretty much any other ideology, liberal, fascist, you name it. How is that even possible?
Okay, so first step in solving any puzzle, we have to make sure we're all speaking the same language. The words we use here, nation, nationality, patriotism, they get thrown around all the time, often interchangeably. But they have very distinct meanings, and getting them straight is absolutely crucial. All right, let's break this down. A nation? That's about a shared identity. It's that feeling of a common story, a common culture, a language. Think of groups like the Kurds or the Catalans, right? They see themselves as a nation. Nationality, on the other hand, that's much simpler. It's your legal status, the passport you carry. And national self-determination, that's the political goal that ties it all together. It's the big idea that every nation deserves its own state, free to control its own destiny.
And this leads us to that classic debate. What's the difference between patriotism and nationalism? Some people will tell you that patriotism is the good one. It's just love for your country, a kind of civic pride, and that nationalism is the political ideology that gets built on top of it. But others argue that in reality, you can't really pull them apart. For our purposes, here's the key takeaway. Patriotism is a feeling, while nationalism is a political program.
Okay, here's a major clue that's going to help us solve our puzzle. We've been talking about nationalism like it's just one thing, but it's not. It's really more like a family of related but very different ideologies. And once you see that, some of those contradictions we saw earlier start to make a lot more sense.
So there are basically three main flavors. First, you've got liberal nationalism, which is this really optimistic vision of a world filled with peaceful, democratic nation-states. Then there's conservative nationalism, which is all about protecting a nation's unique history and traditions. And finally, you get integral nationalism, and this is the aggressive, expansionist version that sees the world as a constant battle for dominance. Let's start with the hopeful version. This is the nationalism that came out of the Enlightenment. Think of people like the Italian revolutionary Mazzini, or even U.S. President Woodrow Wilson. They truly believed that if every nation got its own democratic state, it would lead to a more peaceful, more just world, a true harmony of nations.
Now, conservative nationalism often pops up as a reaction against all that revolutionary change. For thinkers like Edmund Burke, the nation wasn't some contract you just sign up for. No, it was a living, breathing community with deep roots in history and tradition. It's an organic whole that needs to be protected and preserved.
And here we have the darkest face of nationalism. This is the illiberal, anti-democratic, militaristic form we see in fascism. It completely rejects international cooperation. It preaches national superiority. For these integral nationalists, the world isn't a potential community of nations, it's a brutal arena for conflict, where only the strongest deserve to survive and to dominate everyone else.
So we've seen the different types of nationalism, but how does this idea actually work? I mean, how do you get this powerful sense of belonging, this feeling of connection with millions of people you will never, ever meet? How is that actually built?
This quote from the scholar Benedict Anderson is probably one of the most important ideas for understanding nationalism. And the key word here is imagined. Now, he doesn't mean imagined as in fake or made up. Not at all. He means it in the sense that the members of a nation hold a mental image of their community, their connection to each other, even though they'll never know most of their fellow members. They are cultural creations.
So, how is this imagining possible on a massive scale? Well, Anderson points his finger at technology.
Specifically, the printing press combined with capitalism. As books, and especially newspapers, started being mass-produced in everyday languages, not just Latin, people who lived hundreds of miles apart suddenly started reading the same stories in the same language at roughly the same time. This created a shared, simultaneous consciousness. It created a sense that they were all part of the same ongoing story, part of the same community, the nation.
So that leads to this classic chicken and egg question, right? Did groups of people who already felt like a nation rise up and demand their own states? Or did powerful states, with their borders and their laws, create the very conditions that allowed a national identity to form in the first place?
Well, the history on this one is pretty clear. For centuries, you just had states, kingdoms, empires run by dynasties. These states created the political container, the framework of borders and laws. It was only later, starting in the late 1700s, that this new ideology of nationalism came along and started to fill that container, arguing that the true basis of the state shouldn't be the king, it should be the nation.
Okay, it's time. We've got all the pieces on the board. We've looked at the contradictions, the definitions, the different types, and how nations are built. So now let's put it all together and finally solve the puzzle we started with. How can something so philosophically weak be so incredibly powerful?
And here it is. This is the big reveal. The power of nationalism comes precisely from its intellectual weakness. It's not a detailed political theory like socialism or liberalism. It's an intellectual vacuum, basically an empty container just waiting to be filled with, well, pretty much anything. So here's the bottom line. Nationalism's philosophical incoherence isn't a bug, it's a feature. Because it's an empty vessel, it can merge with almost any other political agenda. You can have liberal nationalism, socialist nationalism, fascist nationalism. This makes it unbelievably flexible and adaptable. At the same time, it taps into one of our most deep-seated human needs, the need for community and belonging. And it gives a powerfully simple answer to that really complex question of who should rule: the nation. Its very emptiness is the source of its incredible strength.
And that leaves us with one final, and I think vital question. For over 200 years, this powerful, adaptable container has been filled with everything from the noblest dreams of liberty to the most horrific nightmares of supremacy. As it continues to shape our world, the real question for us is not if nationalism will exist, but what we, and people all around the globe, are going to choose to fill it with.